Risk and Prevention, and I'm the founder and director of the Appalachian Mountain Teen Project, a youth program in central New Hampshire. In the research that resulted in my book, Adolescent Lives in Transition, How Social Class Influences the Adjustment to Middle School, I incorporated some of the strategies of participatory action research, including community advisory groups and youth-led presentations. By listening to my 11 and 12-year-old students, I learned things about transition I could never have known otherwise. I have the pleasure this evening of saying a few words about participatory action research and introducing our panelists. Veronica Garcia, Jessica Madden, Julio Camarota, and Michelle Fine, and I'll say more about them in a moment. First, I want to say that this event came about because of the efforts of the members of the Student Participatory Action Research Group. And I want to name them. They're all here, I believe, or maybe they're outside selling books. They put an awful lot of work into this, and we can thank them for their work. And they're also people who know a lot about participatory action research. Zenab Kakli, Noah Rubin, Carrie Venegas, Liza Pappas, Sarah Dryden-Peterson, and Merritt Dewhurst. So thank you very much for your work in getting this together. Noah's right here. There you are. I also want to thank Sean Tuttle and Megan Legal. They do an amazing job putting these events together, and they've worked very closely with us over the last year and a half to plan this. Thank you also to the Student Government Association for providing funds for this evening's reception. So please join us right after this forum tonight for food and drink. There are books for sale, as you saw outside of this room, and then they'll be upstairs right after the event. We all do our work in really different communities, but as I listened to each of our speakers talk about their work over the last couple of weeks, and though I'm sure we disagree on many points, I was struck by a number of common themes. We think about participatory action research as a practice that is democratic, restorative, relevant, rigorous, and generative, in the sense that it encourages change in both individuals and in communities. Each panelist spoke about participatory action research as an educational and social movement, reminding me of the way Colombian researcher Fals Border described participatory action research as a method for investigating reality in order to change it. At the core of participatory action research is a philosophy of restorative justice. By doing this work, we hope to restore to the lives of young people and communities what has been taken away from them through injustice, racial and sexual oppression, war, economic exploitation, and environmental degradation. Participatory action research restores broader power and possibility for acknowledging that everyone is, as Gramsci said, an intellectual with the capacity to know, name, and change the conditions of their lives. Participatory action research builds and strengthens a pluralistic associational culture by bringing people together across age, race, and social class. In communities where economic and political forces work against cultural survival, participation, and collaboration, participatory action research helps to restore a sense of civic engagement and fosters an awareness of personal place in history and the connection to cultural heritage. Everywhere I go these days, meetings in schools, hospitals, mental health clinics, and community service agencies, people are talking about participatory action research or action research. At a social work conference I attended recently, sponsored by Casey Family Services, a keynote speaker addressed the need for foster children to be more involved in the policies that impact their lives. She used a phrase that I think nicely captures the spirit of this movement: nothing about us without us. The tools of participatory action research, collective problem solving on issues relevant to survival, have been around for millennia. But social psychologist Kurt Lewin, or Kurt Levine, however you want to pronounce it, is credited with initiating modern action research in social science, when in the 1940s he wrote of about group decision-making and social change. He insisted that the context of human life matters, and that social science had to find research methods capable of grasping this complexity. In the early 1970s, I think it was 71, an international team of academics and community activists from colonized nations came together in Tanzania to talk about participatory action research as a response to colonialization. Lewin's work rightfully placed context on the research table, but it was the work that came out of civil rights, feminism, and anti-colonialism that put political, social, and economic analysis back on the table. These two major strands, action research and participatory action research, continue to play out today. In action research, the analytic unit is individual practice. Action research uses documentation, self-reflection, and studies patterns of practice for the primary purpose of making improvements in that practice. For example, I work in a mental health project in New Hampshire, and in this project we're working to improve medical, educational, social service practices to better the lives of children who really struggle with mental health issues that impact their social and emotional well-being. We use documentation, reflective note-taking, dialogue, problem-solving meetings, and we examine the patterns of communication and cooperation within and across institutions. We all seem to know that it would be a good idea to have teachers, students, parents, counselors, primary care practitioners, and child psychologists talking to each other, but changing individual and institutional habits of non-interaction is very hard. So these strategies have helped to make those patterns more clear to us so that we can change them. Participatory action research, on the other hand, involves classrooms and communities in the study of economic, political, and social systems that produce suffering and the inequitable distribution of power and resources. A few years ago, I worked with a teenager at the high school who coordinated a research project called the Teens at Work Project. Together, we created a survey on working conditions for teens in 6 towns, from tourist towns, rural communities, and manufacturing communities. The teens presented their findings at a conference that also had workshops on labor rights, organizing strategies, and the impact of globalization on child workers. They invited students, educators, parents, and importantly, they invited employers to this conference. The teens found a lot of common ground across communities. They spoke about their jobs with a lot of pride. They talked about how working bestowed confidence and self-reliance. And they also spoke about sexual harassment, the frustration of not knowing their work schedules ahead of time, and being afraid to report work-related injuries. But they noted differences as well. The European American teens were surprised to find, for example, that Latino youth on average worked more hours, began working younger, and handed over part of their paychecks to their parents. So you can see in this project that participatory action research lends itself very well to interdisciplinary academic work, youth leadership, community involvement, and cross-group understanding. Participatory action research is a practice engaging questions that are actionable. From results-based management to school reform, from doctors learning from their young patients what it's like to live with asthma, to foresters working with local communities on developing sustainable land management plans. From New York City to Kampala, Uganda, participatory action research has found fertile ground for research practices that aim for self-sufficiency, cooperation, and self-determination. All these themes are central to the presentations you'll hear tonight. So now let me introduce you to the panelists. I'm very excited to be on the same stage with the people who are up here. We had a wonderful conversation earlier, and I'm excited about what you're about to hear. To my left, and I think, let's see, to your left as well, we'll go across, starting with Veronica Garcia, has worked with high school youth for 8 years as a mentor, teacher, community activist, and researcher. In 2001, Veronica came here to the Harvard Graduate School of Education with a degree in psychology and minors in education and Chicana studies from the University of California, Los Angeles. When we spoke recently, Veronica told me that she's doing whatever it takes to help young people from her community to be more successful by helping them to recognize their talent, actively respond to injustice, hold on to high expectations, and know how to create pathways to a good and full future. But Veronica also believes that to be successful, her work with youth must be complemented by changes in educational policy, curriculum, and pedagogy. Since graduating in 2002, I'm proud to say, from the Risk and Prevention Program, she has worked with the Boston Plan for Excellence as a high school program associate. In this capacity, Veronica works with Boston's high school youth using participatory action research and critical research methods. This effort is part of Boston's High School Reform Initiative, funded by the Carnegie Foundation and Boston Plan for Excellence. Her work brings together university-based instructors, high school teachers, parents, and students to support the initiative's purpose, which is to amplify student voices in educational reform and to strengthen school engagement and student engagement and leadership so that they're recognized and valued as co-constructors of social change. Currently, she works with classroom teacher Jessica Madden to coordinate the Research and Activism for Change project at Brighton High School. I also want to mention Stephanie Sibley, who's also here tonight from that project. Next is Jessica Madden-Fuoco, also holds undergraduate degrees in history and secondary education from Boston University, and a master's degree in teaching from Teachers College, where she's currently finishing a second master's degree in educational leadership. Jessica is in her 8th year of teaching and currently teaches 12th grade English and the Research and Activism for Change course at Brighton High School. Jessica and 3 of her colleagues at Brighton High School started a course in 2003 to give their students opportunities to study issues that concerned them and to organize to make positive changes on those issues. Last fall, for example, Jessica helped students research and publicize a practice that is common in a number of Boston public schools, that is locking the school doors after the start of the school day. They found that on any given day in Brighton High, 10 to 50 students are locked out of school if they arrive 45 minutes late. More than 70% of the students surveyed said they decided not to come to school if they overslept or missed the first bus because they knew they'd be locked out. In 2004, Brighton High students, with support from Jessica and grant from What Kids Can Do, researched the inequalities between urban and suburban schools and documented their findings in a 22-minute DVD, The Problem We All Live With. Julio Camarota is an assistant professor in the Bureau of Applied Research and Anthropology and the Mexican American Studies and Research Center at the University of Arizona. He completed his doctorate at Berkeley and has published papers on family, work, and education among Latinos and on the relationship between culture and academic achievement. Using the tools of ethnography, participatory research, and creative writing, Julio collaborates with students and teachers to explore institutional factors that enable or constrain academic achievement and promising creative strategies for liberatory pedagogy. At the heart of this work is the notion of encuentro, the co-construction of knowledge through dialogue among parents, teachers, and community members. This is a philosophy of practice that is oriented toward hope, self-determination, and liberation. It is nurturing of indigenous local culture by preserving the capacity and appreciation for sharing life stories. Julio is the founder and director, or should I say he's involved in, not the director. We had a conversation about this earlier, maybe he'll mention it to you, of the Social Justice Education Project, a project that teaches Latino students from local Tucson high schools to conduct research at their schools and within their communities. The project has become a model for actively engaging students in their own education, and it's been so successful that they're beginning to document the re-engagement of students who are staying in school because of the project. Like Jessica's students, the students in the Social Justice Education Project study issues in education, housing, and environmental safety. They scripted, shot, edited, and produced 2 documentary DVDs. And by the way, Julio likes to dance. So if anyone's going to do some salsa dancing after this event, Julio and his partner Rebecca would like to join you. Michelle Fine is probably known to most of you here. She's a distinguished professor of psychology, women's studies, and urban education at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Michelle's writing focuses on theoretical questions of social justice, how people think about unjust distribution of resources and social practices, how such inequities are legitimized, and when and how people take steps to resist. Originally trained as a laboratory-based social psychologist, very much at ease with both quantitative and qualitative methods, Michelle is interested in developing creative research strategies that result in work that transforms as much as it informs. It reveals the subjective voice and provides a powerful foundation for advocacy and change. This subjective voice is celebrated in a piece she wrote called Bridging the Gap, Feminisms and Participatory Action Research. This is Michelle's writing now. Jews and fabric have a long history. Always carry your clothes on your back. You never know when they're going to come after you. Raised as a working-class Jew, I talk with my hands, dialect peppered with Yiddish. Daughter of refugees, I write feminist, think critical, organize loud, and I mother. I carry underwear wherever I go. You can read this wonderful piece in its entirety online. Michelle's work serves as a lighthouse for those of us searching for creative and flexible research methodologies that have the capacity to be deep and authentic expressions of micro-level lived experience, while also reaching for broader meaning, usefulness, and common understanding. Recent co-authored publications by Michelle include Silenced Voices in Extraordinary Conversations, Construction Sites, Excavating Race, Class, and Gender with Urban Youth, Working Method, and with Lonnie Guinier, she wrote Becoming Gentlemen, Women, Law School, and Institutional Change. Finally, Echoes of Brown, Youth Documenting and Performing the Legacy of Brown versus the Board of Education. And not finally, she's written a whole lot more of that, but we don't have time to name all of that. I love the titles. The next time I write a book, I'm going to call you for a title. Michelle's currently working with youth across national and cultural lines on a project that explores common and contrasting social and psychological consequences of educational discrimination. So please join me and welcome these wonderful panelists who have joined us here. We're going to begin with a presentation from Veronica and Jessica. And each person will have about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and comments.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Donna said, my name's Jess Madden-Fulco, and I'm a teacher at Brighton High School. Veronica and I decided to just cut out our whole introduction because, Donna, you really covered everything we wanted to say about ourselves and the work that we do. So we really want to focus right now on what our students have been doing in our class this year. And by way of introduction, I just want to say that, as Donna told you, some of my colleagues and I started doing this work in a class that we developed a few years ago at Brighton High School. This is the third year that Brighton High has had this course, but Veronica and I are here together because we started collaborating on this last year, and we've developed this class and this program that you're going to see now, which is called the Research and Activism for Change class.
And also, we had invited our students. We wanted them to come and be a part of this today, and we had about 8 or 9 students that said they were going to come, and within since this morning, all of them have said they couldn't make it today. It's their spring break, so a lot of them are out of town and just doing things with friends.
Yeah, but you should see how they show up when they're presenting. So we're gonna have a talk with them about that, because they presented at the Alumni of Color conference here about a month ago, and Teresa Perry's here, who moderated the panel that the students were on, and almost all of them came to that. So, but we're sad that they're not here today. So,
all right. So Jess mentioned, we've known each other for the last almost 4 years now, and last year we put together a planning committee with university professors, Jessica, a couple of her students, myself, Stephanie Sibley, and people who work with youth in different community organizations in Boston to develop RACs. So it's really been the involvement of a broader school community to develop this course. And now I want to give you a sense of how we value the PAR framework in the Research and Activism for Change class. So one, it provides students with data, which is evidence that confirms their experiences, but it also serves as an entry point into the conversations with adults. So a lot of times kids will say, well, this is a problem here, I'm facing this here, but when they have data to actually back up what they're saying, it becomes much more powerful. Secondly, it situates the knowledge in the students. They're the ones going through the realities of their schools and classrooms every day, so who better to talk about the problems in the students themselves. It raises their consciousness, not only as an individual about what's happening around them, but also they learn about what's happening to other students and their peers, and that everyone's having very similar experiences but in different ways. And so through that process, they begin to see themselves as change agents. It develops their academic and critical literacy. So the academic literacy students are that are inherent in reading and writing, your critical thinking, your analysis, your summarizing, your engaging in your text. But when we talk about critical literacies, we're talking about that at a much deeper level. And I have up there Ernest Morel because since last year, he's been working with us in the development of RAC. And for those of you who don't know him, he is a UCLA education professor, and he's done very similar work with student researchers in Los Angeles. So he's helped us out a lot with this course and really helped us to make more explicit how we develop the critical literacies in students and in this work, which is not just reading and writing just to read and write, but it's really to be more critical of the messages that are inherent in the text. So what are the social, political, and economic and cultural relationships that come in language and literacy, and how are they used in understanding one's world? So through the PAR framework, student voice and empowerment serve as a vehicle for academic achievement of our students, particularly students from marginalized backgrounds, marginalized by race, by class, by their language, or by their culture, and other ways that are not valued by dominant mainstream society. And we see that marginalization play out in the education of our students in the public schools. They're silenced, they're disempowered, they're disrespected many times. And so using PAR really puts the power back in the hands of the young people to be able to advocate for themselves, but through a process that also supports their academic achievement and their development. So, we need our youth to be civically engaged, but also academically prepared to be successful in all areas of their life.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about what we do in the class, and then a lot of our presentation is going to focus on the PAR project that the students are currently engaged in. But starting in September, students in the course studied history of public education, both local Boston history of education and national history of education. They learned about social movements, and they've learned about organizing. Through this, they've examined aspects of identity such as race and ethnicity, culture, language, academic experiences. In the course, students have read work by James Anderson, Jonathan Kozol, Paulo Freire. When we studied about the history of Boston schools, students learned about all of those court cases, Morgan versus Hennigan, and they read a historical fiction that is based on that history, which really helped them understand what it was like to be going to Boston public schools through that time period.
the students who are in our class, we have 24 11th and 12th graders, and they were selected through a group and individual interview process. They're diverse by race, ethnicity, language, and academic experiences, and this was really important to us. We have students in the class who've had very positive experience in their school with their adults around them, and then we have some kids who have had some very negative experiences. So it was really important for us to bring students who had all kinds of experience into this class so they could really understand and be able to research all the issues that impact students in their school. And we also had a 2-day summer orientation program for the students to come together and meet one another, start building some relationships, and also get them ready to be a part of the class.
So now we're going to tell you about the research project that the students have been conducting. We started the project in January, but prior to that we went through a long process of trying to figure out what do you want to focus your research on. And I'm sure I don't need to tell a lot of you how difficult it can be to craft good research questions and to try to get all 24 of our students to really figure out what's important, what's doable, what do you want to take on. So these are the questions that students ultimately came up with, and I think the reason that they chose these questions is we do some college support with the students because, as Veronica said, we want the students to be academically prepared to apply to college and attend college. And we did this workshop where we brought in students' transcripts and gave them their GPAs, which shouldn't really be a rare occurrence in a high school, but a lot of the students had never known their GPA. Many of them didn't see their transcripts. Many of them asked for their transcripts and were not given their transcripts. A lot of these types of issues. So that experience led students to choose these research questions because they really wanted to look at what are Brighton High students' academic experiences, how well does Brighton High prepare students for college, and what could Brighton High do to better prepare students for college. So looking at it both from the academic preparation but also from the actual you need to know your GPA type of preparation. So the first thing that the students did when they began the research in January is they developed a 4-page survey that they administered to 400 students in 26 classrooms at Brighton High. And we made sure that the classrooms were representative of the school population, so there were special education classes, sheltered English instruction classes, honors and AP classes. And then the students have now conducted interviews, facilitated student focus groups, they visited other Boston public high schools, and they've completed data entry and analysis, which is still ongoing.
Now we wanted to give you some highlights from the data, and we put up here a couple pictures. These are students entering all the surveys in the computers, and we were very fortunate to have IBM donate 12 computers to the class so that the students could enter their data, write up all the reports, and all the different work that they were doing. So we've been very fortunate to have that resource in the classroom. So the survey covered classroom experiences. In the first half of the school year, students reported the following in at least 75% of their classes. So that's 3 of their classes. They're in a 4x4 block, so this is representing 3 of their classes. Only 23% felt that the work was challenging. Only 40% of students said they had their own set of textbooks, and only 65% get assigned homework on a daily basis. Regarding the college process, students are not having in-depth discussions about their academic careers with their guidance counselors. So you can tell by the darker chart, the high numbers of students saying they have never discussed different aspects of the college process. What courses do I need to graduate from high school? Mm-hmm. Do I need to take AP or honors classes? And what colleges or universities are suited to meet my needs and interests?
And as I said about the students in our class not knowing their GPAs, the results across these 400 students who they surveyed were 44% of all students don't know their GPAs. And something that our students found really disturbing is that they administered this survey in January or February,
Right.
and 21% of 12th graders didn't know their GPAs. And the students were really surprised because theoretically they would have, gone through the college application process. And this is what a student in a 12th grade focus group said. I knew I had a GPA, but I didn't know I needed to check it. So there's just not enough information for the students about this process. So now we're going to talk about, the reason Veronica and I do this work is because we think it benefits the students. So we're going to read some quotes that we have. After doing the AOCC conference, we did a debrief with the students and we had them do a written reflection. These were some of the quotes that they said. One benefit we think is there's increased confidence and sense of empowerment. One student said, we have a fire burning in this classroom, the fire of knowledge. Another student said, now I know how to approach teachers when I have a problem, because before I would just react, but now I've learned how to talk about the problem with the teacher. I have a way to address the issues. And another thing that's really important about this work is that students see these problems around them all the time, but they're often made to feel like the problem is only them and the problem is their fault. And students have responsibility, obviously, but I'm telling you, all of the problems in my school are not my students' fault. And a lot of what I think is a benefit of this work is that students can see, okay, there's some evidence to confirm things that I've experienced. And one RAC student said, he was alluding to a James Anderson article. He said, I see the connection between the elementary school gap and the high school gap. It's all related, because without education, there is no life. Education is life.
Some of the other skills that the students have developed, obviously, they're doing high-quality research. They're analyzing interviews. They're analyzing their data. They're inputting data. They're writing about it. So developing all of their academic literacies in the process, things that many of us didn't do until we went away to college and then graduate school, and we're trying to get our students to do that right now. Relationships with other students, this is really important because I said earlier, the students in our class, had many different experiences, but bringing them together in this class, they really had to talk about each other's experience and really learn from each other and really find a way to make it that it's not about me in this class, but it's about what's best for our school community. And I'm not saying that our relationships are perfect in the class, but there's a relationship there that did not exist before had these students not come together in this way. Some of the other broader impacts on the school district and community levels, an increased effort to engage students. And I think we've seen this just over the last several years that we've been doing this work. The students have been invited to present their work to the superintendent, to the school committee, to the deputy superintendents, conferences, various meetings across the community. There's definitely more attention to what students are saying about their schools, and particularly using the data that they've generated to have those conversations. So I think that it's still a work in progress, because it's not just to have students be there just to be there and to talk, but what are you really doing with the information that they're providing? So.
Yeah, and at Brighton High, the students' work has definitely had a lot of impact. Sometimes their research has not been very well received, but the students keep presenting their research, keep trying to keep conversations open with the adults. One exciting thing that I can report is Donna mentioned how students in the class last year did research on the school's tardy policy, which includes a lockout component. And our school site council at our school is planning to end the lockout next year because of what the students have done. So they keep going to school site council meetings, and, they keep presenting the research and working with adults on that. So there is that type of concrete impact of their work at the school also. But another impact at the school level is that when students engage in this high quality research, adults have to take what they say seriously. And some of them might not have if the students weren't doing this type of research. And this also challenges notions of research, who does it, And if there's adults who've been in a pattern of saying, it's the student's fault, or it's, they don't try, and then they see students doing the type of work that they're doing in this class, it challenges their notions of students' capabilities.
So some of the lessons learned and also some of the challenges that we've had in RAC, measuring the impact on student performance. Ultimately, we want this work to impact all of the things that students are doing in their lives, all the other classes that they have, their other experiences. And this has been a challenge because this is one class where they're asked to do more work, to think in a different way, to think about their education in a different way, society, and our students have told us that they've been conditioned since they got to school, not to do a whole lot. So, even though they know what we're asking them to do is important and they want to do it, it's just we've bumped up against some resistance in that process as well. Secondly, aligning social justice efforts with academic efforts. Going to just what I was just saying, we have a lot of students who want to go out and do all the activities and want to go to all the community events. They want to go talk about their research everywhere, but at the same time, they're still struggling to do their homework, whether it's in RAC or it's in another class. And so we try to tell them all the time, people are going to dismiss what you do if you don't have both, if you're not strong in both of those, because your teacher's going to say, oh, you want to do this activity, you want to go here, but you're not doing homework in my class, or you're not doing your paper. And so we don't want that. We don't want that to happen to our students. We want them to have both of those efforts done equally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another challenge that we've struggled with this year is we wanted the students to be really prepared to do the research. That's why we studied the history of education, the history of Boston education. We wanted them to go into this work with a lot of that understanding. But I think we waited too long to start having the students conduct the research and plan what action they're going to take based on their research results. So we're trying to figure out ways of adapting things for next year so that students are prepared but are still doing the work all along. And the other thing that's been a challenge is figuring out how to involve other adults in this work. As I mentioned earlier, I started the class with 3 colleagues. None of them are at my school anymore, and luckily I have Veronica and other folks who work with me, but none of them are other teachers. So it's been a challenge to figure out how to get other people involved.
So just to close, some implications, or now what? Our question we want to leave with is, how do we embed critical and academic literacies via a PAR social justice framework that's embedded in all teaching? So we have some teachers and educators who think that you can't do PAR because you have to focus on the MCAS, or you have to focus on a particular unit, and not saying that doing this work with youth, it can be applied to any classroom that you have in any content area, because it's really about teaching kids in a different way to think critically about their world, to read and write in a stronger way. And so you can really do this across the board, but it's trying to convince other people that you can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that we feel really strongly is that all students should be having experiences like this. And as Veronica said, we believe this can go on in any type of course. So, something we want to see is that more students can have experiences like this in whatever classes they're taking, because we have students who come to us all the time, and they come up to students in the class and they say, how do I get into this class? And it's only one class in the whole school. So that's another thing that we're working on, is how can we expand these opportunities for young people.
Yep, I think that's it.
And that's it.